My name is Barbara Laxon. I live in the city of Bradford in McKean County, which is a designated environmental justice area. The main group that I work with is called Save Our Streams PA. Basically, we locate and document orphaned and abandoned wells, and we try to bring awareness to people of what's going on in the field. And throughout Bradford are abandoned oil and gas wells. In the center of town is a refinery. The poverty rate is 46% in the neighborhoods with the highest concentration of legacy wells. Bradford is considered one of the 35 poorest cities in PA. There's something called the Justice 40 initiative that says that at least 40% of the money from this new bill is to go to plugging wells in environmental justice neighborhoods. And there's not a single well in Greater Bradford area that's been plugged. However, about 8 or 10 miles south of Bradford in the city of Lewis Run, they plugged a well, which is very definitely not an environmental justice neighborhood. And they have listed on the form that it's in Bradford, which it's not. In Bradford, there are wells everywhere in town. There's nowhere in town really that you can go without being maybe 5 to 10 blocks away from a well. It may be an active well or maybe an abandoned well, whatever. There's a house that's maybe 4 or 5 long blocks from where I am right now that has 3 wells in a small yard, in their yard, and a tank on the other side of the house, which is obviously the wells fed that tank. If you go down the railroad tracks, there's a tank battery right along the railroad tracks. The line that runs down right along the driveway of the houses right above it. There's oil and gas infrastructure everywhere in town, everywhere in the city of Bradford. There's one, it used to be a school. They tore the school down. Now they put a YWCA up there. The tank, you can smell it for blocks away. A refinery is a facility where they take in crude oil as it comes from the ground. They process it into different types of oils that are used, whether it's like Pennzoil. They make Pennzoil here that you can put in your car. They make oils that you use for hydraulic equipment and stuff, various lubricating oils, all of that kind of thing is their output. If I go 2 long blocks down the street, I can see the flare that's going 24/7, okay? And that edge of the property is probably, maybe 10 or 12 blocks away. And the flare is there. And my son actually lives right next to the flare. You can look out his driveway and see the smoke billowing from the flare. Okay, I moved here in 2016. I was diagnosed with cancer, and within a couple of years of when I moved here, and due to our wonderful healthcare system in the United States, and I say that very much tongue in cheek, it was a year before I was able to be treated. And it's been about a year since I was treated. But I'm still breathing the same air, and although I filter my water, it's you can only filter out so much. And I still use water to take showers and wash dishes because I can't afford to buy large amounts of water to use for those things. But with this flare going 24/7, I'm breathing in all kinds of particulate matter. That's a given. But we don't know how many other things, ethane, benzene, methane. I was just reading about how much benzene comes out of some of these flares. Pretty much everybody I talk to has had cancer here, or somebody in their family has had cancer at one time or another. When I go to take a shower, once my hair gets wet, I notice the smell, and it's pretty awful. My clothes, it smells like burning building, chemically sooty kind of smell. If I go somewhere, we go to Harrisburg, or we go to wherever out of town, and you lay on a sheet in the hotel room or something, smell, and it's like you can really, the difference is it's pretty obvious. And there's a lot of areas in town. There's one particular area that we've been trying to bring to the attention of the press, but 7 or 8 blocks from here, an area where they have a couple of pump jacks that are all overgrown in the weeds beside the street, but above the street, there's like a mountaintop. There's nobody that lives up there, but there's wells. I've been told that there's 30 wells up there, and they empty into these tanks that are on this street. We were just there filming a couple of weeks ago, and you could see there's like a hose that comes to the edge of the property through this fence and down to the street. And you could see where something had been leaking or deliberately spilled from this thing, and it was all stained all down across the street. And the smell was pretty bad. And the smell in this area is always bad, from a block or 2 blocks in any direction come by there, because it's uphill. And so most of Bradford is in the valley, and then it works its way up the hills in every direction. So to get my exercise, I walk up all the different hills around town, and I walk up there often. You get anywhere near it, you can smell it. There's houses all around on that level, and I feel sorry for the people that live there. Not to mention the fact that in addition to the tanks above ground, there's tanks below ground, which is illegal. It's been illegal for quite a few years, but we've reported it to the DEP many times, and they say, yeah, they're going to do something about it. And nothing happens. Probably half the people, or at least a third of the people in town, work either at the refinery or at one of the businesses that are involved with the refinery. There's a place right next door that I won't name, right next door to the refinery, that makes pipe fittings and stuff for the refinery and for pipelines and oil wells and stuff. So, you know, pretty much everybody depends for their livelihood on either the refinery or, you know, the little stores around town that support the area. I do know that the Bradford Era, which is the local newspaper, reported in 2019 that the DEP had resolved its issues with the refinery, or the refinery had resolved its issues with the DEP or whatever. And when I read the article, one of the things that they had issue with was the flaring. I'm not sure what was resolved, since they're still flaring 24/7. They have this one huge one that has 2 or 3, I think it's 3, but of these big things, and the flame is coming out, you know, several feet. I mean, you can see it from literally miles away on the highway. And there's also another one that is a smaller one that you can't always see. It depends on the light, and, you know, at nighttime you can see it most of the time burning. The one that's closest to me, you can see in the brightest sunlight, you can see the flames coming out of it. It's huge. As it exists today, with the materials that they use to plug wells, there's no such thing as a plugged well, because the plugs fail unless and until they come up with material that is permanent, or very nearly permanent. They have to replug the well, all wells, every well that's ever been drilled, from the first well in the 1800s, whenever, till whatever they're planning right now. They all have to be plugged and replugged for the life of the planet. Nobody acknowledges that. Nowhere do they say, oh, we're going to plug all these wells. Okay, fine. They're plugged, done. No, not done. You know, even the EPA, or, you know, they never acknowledge the fact that these wells, if you look it up, the industry will tell you they'll last 20 to 50 years. So even if you believe that, which we know is not true, but even if you believe that, that's still in 50 years, you have to plug it again. We have lots of very documented proof that wells often don't, the plugs often don't last a whole 1 year. There, depending on who you go by, there's anywhere from 300,000 to 750,000. And that's just, and they really have no idea. Because before the 1980s, there really was no, they didn't keep track of them. They weren't required to permit them. There was no bonding. There was no nothing. So the most reliable seems to be the old farm maps that document wells. And they were created by some guy flying over in a little like crop plane type plane, you know, and just flying over the area and marking them down on a map. Yeah, well, we need to have a Department of Environmental Protection that protects us rather than the oil and gas drillers.